is based on your vocabulary. You say a circuit. It seems to me there are multiple circuits, and the question arises how this degeneracy works and how, in fact, you can select one over the other in the absence of input. So I believe that you've already hinted at the fact that there's a multiplicity of circuits. So there's a contingent question which says, if I made another column right next door,
yes,
would it look the same? That's the conjecture part. Now the question is, what are you going to pick for input?
Okay, so the first part is, it's a little bit related to the previous question, in that I agree with you, there is an issue of overriding algorithm that may start controlling how exactly you get a specific instantiation of a circuit. And what we've seen is that there are such powerful genetic rules. You know, there's this whole debate about nature versus nurture, but in my view, it's a nonsense debate, because 99% of the time, what we see is genetic. And the small amount of changes, we're sitting on top of how a human sees. We don't see like cats see, we don't see like monkeys see. We see like a human sees. And so there is a certain amount of genetic control as to what kind of circuit's going to work. My prediction is for the future that the difference between species is synaptic precision. That the synapses become much more precisely located. And we're going to have to understand how do we get more and more precise synaptic locations. The second question was, what was the second question? Oh, the input. At this point in time, what we're interested in doing is seeing that we have a calibrated circuit. And that requires different kinds of inputs, the kinds of inputs that we can do in experiments. Because that we can reproduce, we can stimulate 1 cell, 12 cells, 1,000 cells in layer 4 and look at the responses in other areas. We want to analyze the circuit and calibrate it first as a chip. Once we're confident with that, we're going to begin to put it together and start to put in the thalamus and move towards whole brain stimulation and have realistic types of inputs. This is the first step.
Hi. With your focus on using of supercomputers, I was wondering if you think that the limitations of supercomputers, even as powerful as Blue Gene, will that in any way affect what you're doing in the progress? And do you think that we'll have to use new machines once you get to a certain level?
I don't know if I should say this, but I'm trying to convince the Swiss government to buy a petaflop Blue Gene. They are hesitating, but they haven't said no. It's a very expensive machine, even with a massive discount from IBM. So we can get bigger, but even a petaflop machine is not going to simulate 100 billion neurons. So there are discussions also with IBM in terms of looking at building both FPGA-based computers, specialized ASICs, like the cell processor is a specialized ASIC that is used to solve equations for real-time rendering. But you could, in principle, build ASICs that just solve neural equations. And this could speed up computing by a huge amount. And if you built a specialized computer that just does that, I think that within current technology, without quantum computing and all kinds of other stuff, with current technology, with enough money, you could build a computer that could simulate billions of neurons. I think it's possible. Yes, I think even the current Blue Gene, even if you got the petaflop machine, you're not going to simulate with this level of detail a full-scale human brain. You'd be able to probably simulate a mouse brain, which is still a good step.
As someone who is a theoretician and hasn't simulated or experimented with a single neuron, let alone I applaud anybody who can model well one of them, let alone 10,000. But I do have some questions here, because my naive understanding of how the connectivity works is that, say, a cortical neuron has 10,000 immediate afferent neighbors, and maybe half of those are within the same region, say V1, and the other half are coming bottom up or top down from outside regions. Then if you're only simulating 10% of them in a certain, maybe in certain columns deeper in the cortex, this doesn't apply quite as much. But if you're doing only 10% of them and the connectivity is nowhere near 10% within there, then you're actually, the real neurons wouldn't be getting most of their inputs from the neighbors that you're
The
getting
secret
them.
of the neocortex is that the recurrent circuit within the local circuit is almost 80%. So 20 to 30% of the input is really extrinsic. These are very powerful local recurrent circuits, extremely powerful, and they run on their own. So it's not true there's only 10%. They are very strongly recurrent circuits. The second thing is we know more or less where they're coming in. And those inputs can be supplemented with background activity, with pattern correlations, and so on. So it's not an obstacle. What we refer to as a minimal circuit is that a neuron needs about, most of these cells have about 1,000 to 2,000 other neurons. And so that's why a 10,000 neuron circuit is the minimum circuit.
Well, perceptions on the dendrites is an interesting concept, of course. And one of the things I like about it is that it seems that there's strong evidence in experiments for timing codes, and the timing information seems to be preserved at the synapses, at the dendrites, but has a heck of a hard time penetrating into the soma level and beyond. So there's something in support of that. I have one last question before I hand this off. How did you model the thresholding behavior of the neurons to decide when they were going to spike in response to the stimulation that they got from their neighbors? Was that just a
The neurons are
refractory
modeled
period when they
using-
couldn't spike at all, and then a constant threshold, or something more sophisticated than that?
The neurons are modeled with ion channels, where every ion channel is what's called a Hodgkin-Huxley channel. It's still a simple version. We're going to actually go to a much more advanced version of a channel, but currently that's the most popular way of modeling an ion channel. We put ion channels in, and the ion channels, depending on the kinetics you give them, give rise to a nonlinear behavior, which is the actual potential.
I wish to ask regarding the information processing. So you said that every second you get a terabyte of information, and you said that you didn't want to keep all this information, so instead of that, you got some visualization program going on. So I still didn't understand what you decided to keep out of this information, or are you not
Right
just
now we're not
watching?
keeping anything because it's just the beginning. It's the first version of the circuit.
So
We're
you're just looking
using
at the
it to calibrate.
dynamic now.
There's a lot of things that you can look at in terms of why and when different neurons are firing. We've been studying them for 15 years, and a lot of it is just using it as visual diagnostics to immediately see whether things are wrong. We could look at the circuit and see that the certain RI, which is axial resistance, is incorrect because the propagation is too far, and things like that. You could actually use it for a huge amount of diagnostics way before you go to fine level quantitative
So the
analysis.
current analysis is by eyes.
Sorry?
So the current analysis of the data is by eyes, by viewing what we see.
We are now at the phase where we're moving into a very large analysis program, and this is where we have a very strong team with IBM and going into analysis in all different forms. And so visualization is a way of pre-screening the data and having fun at the same time.
I know it would be perfect to have another half an hour of discussion and questioning, but I know that we have to move on. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
So thank you very much. We shall now proceed to lunch in the
It's an
cafeteria.
honor to meet you. I
There'll
know
be
a
people
lot
outside
about you and-
providing directions.
Fantastic. Yes, yes, I did. You worked with